I am 𝑺𝑰𝑩𝒀𝑳. I'm an artist living and working in Johannesburg, and I send my greetings to the audience in Taiwan and hope that our production of Sybil is of interest to you. The story of Sybil. Sybil was a prophetess in classical European literature, coming from outside Naples in Italy. And the story was you would go to the Sybil with your questions about your life. How long will I live? What will my future be? Will I survive COVID? All of these sort of questions. And you'd write your question down on an oak leaf. And you would leave your leaf at the mouth of the cave where the Sybil lived. And the Sybil would take your questions and write an answer, giving you an answer to your questions, and leave the answers on leaves at the front of the cave. But, and this is the central point, as you arrived to pick up your leaf from the mouth of the cave, there would always be a wind that would blow, and the leaves would swirl around, so you never knew if the leaf you were getting was your fate or someone else's fate. This is the central story of the Sybil that I was thinking about while making the production of Waiting for the Sybil. How much of our fate can we know? What agency do we have if our fate is already decided? How should the audience make sense of this? There are many different scenes, 6 or 7 different scenes, each with a curtain dropping in between, using a mixture of charcoal animation, collage, actors on the stage moving like mobiles. Everything is in motion. The central organizing principle is the leaves turning, whether they are people as leaves or pages of books as leaves. It all has to do with an unstable understanding of where we are. There's a sequence in which a man tries to find a safe seat to sit on the stage. But as he comes to a chair, so it collapses. And this, on the one hand, it's a scene of finding the right chair and the wrong chair. But the question is, I suppose, of those moments when we don't know if we're making the right or the wrong decision. We know for every air crash that exists, there are people who caught the aeroplane at the last moment and found the wrong chair, and people who were going to be on the plane, but at the last moment missed the flight or changed their minds and so escaped that fate and had a different fate. So that's what the scenes of the chairs, and in all ways that the production was made, we play with different elements. What is it to have the right chair and the wrong chair? What is it to make a human mobile? And see how these can work in the general format of the chamber opera. It's not that we have a clear meaning for each piece, it's that we're interested in what we recognize when we see them. So the right chair or the wrong chair is about the terror of making the wrong choice or not knowing what our fate will be. Now, the Sibyls were, of course, an old form of prediction of the future. And these days, this is mainly done, as we know, through algorithms. Instead of studying the entrails of birds or praying to the gods to know what our future will be, we rely on scans, on medical science, on the predictions of the algorithm to know what our life expectancy is. In many cases, we give over and believe with great confidence the predictions of what the weather is going to be in 4 days' time, which we get from our phones, which is all based on algorithm interpreting information. But at a personal level, one has to understand that an algorithm, in general, is the enforcing on an individual of the data results of a mass of people which have been equalized, so that the individual disappears under the power of the algorithm. And also with the algorithms, which is our contemporary form of prediction, our contemporary oracle or Sybil, also with the contemporary algorithm, also with the algorithm as our contemporary Sybil, there's the belief that we are being fed by the algorithm, that it gives us answers to the questions we have. What music should I listen to? What's my health going to be like in 5 years' time? Whereas in fact we know the deep truth of the algorithm is that it is sucking us dry. So if it's like a huge pig with millions of teats and we're sucking on each teat, each of our phones, we think it's feeding us, but in fact we are constantly feeding our information back into it. And who knows what strange monster this algorithm turns into in the end. In the production, as with many of my productions, there's an element of Greek mythology, of classical mythology, or the historical events. But all of these are, in a way, looking at contemporary problems. It's not necessarily to say they are universal problems, but they are iterative. In other words, they are problems which reappear. And so re-looking at them in old forms is one way of confronting them. And with the Sibyl, I suppose it would be a question of agency. How much can we control ourselves and the world around us? And how much are we simply subject to fates that are already decided for us? Now, it's not as if I have a clear idea of what an audience should be taking away from the production. The audience should just be open to what arrives at them. There's a lot of things to look at. There's the music, there's the making of the music, the actors, the dancers, and there's the projections. And there's an overabundance, there's an excess. But if one relaxes into it, your eye and your ear makes its own choice of what you should be following, what you should be focusing on. And that's the production you see. So sometimes different people watching the same thing see two very different productions, and that's fine. There's not a right understanding, there's not a correct interpretation. The production is always a mixture of what comes to you, the audience, from the stage, and what you project onto it. What are the associations you have with the different scenes that you see in front of it? There's a connection in this production to the work of Alexander Calder. This is because when the production was first done in Rome, it was done as the second half of a double bill. And the first half was a production called Work in Progress, made by Alexander Calder in 1968. And in Alexander Calder's production, of course, there are his usual mobiles, huge colored plates that are suspended from the roof of the theater that swirl and turn. But there's an innocence in those colored sheets just turning in the wind, as we know from his mobiles. And the project we make of Sibyl takes this principle of swirling and turning and rotating objects, but imbues them, I think, with a kind of understanding of the double-edged nature. They can be innocent, but they can also be quite oppressive. It can be that there is no sense to be made, or there can be a moment of coherence when different facets line up and then lose their coherence as they turn again. I think that would be the heart of what we would hope to show in this production. I hope that that audiences will enjoy it and be open to what they receive from the production and not feel they have to have read a book about it in advance. We welcome you to seeing our production of Sibyl.